Hello and welcome to this video on the Confucian idea of harmony. Now, I've been going through various passages in the Confucian Analects by theme. Find an important theme in the Analects, look at several different passages that talk about it. In this video, I'm going to look at the Confucian idea of harmony and thereby possibly wrap up this series, or at least wrap up the portion of this series where I'm looking at the Analects specifically, though I can't promise not to change my mind and do a couple other thematic videos on the Analects. And I've been seriously thinking I might want to do extra videos on some of the other ancient Confucian texts in like manner to how I've been doing this. Now, before we begin, I've replenished my supply of awesome Hong Kong pictures, usually while hiking. And this is, well, where is this? We're on Hong Kong Island looking, I should think, roughly northwest. We're on something called High West Peak or something like that. Let's just leave it at that. But, you know, off in the distance, if you wanted to have any idea what we're looking at, Victoria Harbor somewhere over here, somewhere, I suppose. And maybe if the day were clearer or if I could zoom in a little, I'd say that might be where Disneyland is. And anyway, let's just move it to the lower right-hand corner so that corner looks good while I keep myself for right-hand corner. And we talk about harmony in the Confucian Analects. Let's go to these brief observations from my notes. Virtue in the Analects means a unity or a harmony, and you can identify harmony in 5 aspects. There's a harmony between human nature and our principles. Our principles should be the principles that are appropriate to human nature. Our moral principles should be the principles that help us live properly as human beings. If you want a further elaboration of the general idea here, I say step down as many centuries as necessary to find what later Confucian philosophers think, or step over to the Greeks for a bit and see what Aristotle says about the proper function of the human being. I think the concept of the proper function of the human being is pretty darn good for going into detail on the idea that our principles should line up to human nature. Now, please don't misunderstand the idea of human nature. It doesn't mean what happens automatically or what happens without intervention. It's referring to how we should live according to the type of thing we are. Just as this teacup is a particular type of thing and it has a proper function that goes along with the type of thing it is. Its proper function is to safely deliver warm tea to my mouth, and the proper function of my hand is to grasp things, like grasp the teacup. Proper function of the eyes is to see, and the proper function of the human being is to live in accordance with virtues like, well, let's scroll up to the vocabulary words because I know I might need them. Virtues like yan and lai and yi, and so on. Okay, so nature here does not mean the physical world or the laws of physics or the way things work when we don't interfere. It means, it doesn't mean the environment, whatever that even means. It means the kind of thing we are, which has some implications for how we should be. And I think the Aristotelian elaboration is fine. But by all means, look for Confucian elaboration. I don't think you'll find it in the Analects as such. I think you'll find it in sources like Mencius. Mencius has some lovely passages in what I think are more or less the same kind of thing. Natural law ethics is what we're talking about here. So there's a harmony in Confucianism. And virtue means that harmony between human nature and our principles. Our principles should be harmonized to the type of being we are, telling us to live properly in accordance with the kind of thing we are. And then there should be harmony obtaining between those principles and how we live. And then there should be harmony between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. We shouldn't expect other people to live up to standards we're not going to live up to. And there should be harmony between how I treat one person and how I treat another person. How we treat all people should be harmonized. And all of this leads to a harmonious society. And in this way, harmony is one of those concepts that you could say, for lack of a better verb, permeates Confucianism. Now let's go into just a bit of detail on some of these. Let's start with this passage that suggests to me all these kinds of harmony. Well, several of them at least can be found in this passage, but we have to be careful here. In this translation, this being the James Legge Public Domain translation, we read that Confucius says his doctrine is that of an all-pervading unity. One of his followers seems to understand. Confucius goes out. Other disciples ask him, what's the master talking about? And he says, the doctrine of our master is to be true to the principles of our nature and the benevolent exercise of them to others, this and nothing more. So this looks like a statement of harmony. Be true to the principles of our nature. Our principles should line up to our nature, and our lives should line up to our principles, and we should treat others according to the same principles that we presumably expect others to treat us according to. That's at least three aspects of harmony there. But if you look at other translations, you don't find all the same concepts. So be careful with this passage until you surpass me dramatically and learn how to read the original. Without doing that, let's at least check alternative translations here. Book 4, section 15, I think is what we want. So here we are in the Charles Muller translation, not public domain, but very conveniently on the internet. Thank you, Dr. Muller. We still have some concepts of unity, but not all the same. My way is penetrated by a single thread. Way, that's Tao here. My way is penetrated by a single thread. Disciple responds, yes. Some other disciples ask what the master meant. And the response, our master's way is to be loyal and have a sense of reciprocity, and that's it. Now, you certainly find some aspects of harmony in this passage, but not as many in this translation. Let's check now the Oxford World Classics translation, I think by Dawson, book 4, section 15. The master says, by one single thread is my way bound together. Disciple replies, yes. Master leaves. The disciples ask the other disciple, what did he mean? And the other disciple understood Confucius says, our master's way simply consists of loyalty and reciprocity. So there's some harmony here, but not all of the harmony we might have thought was in that passage by going off of just the Legge translation. So let's go to things where it's a little easier to track some of the details of the harmony in Confucianism. Right? It's easier for me anyway. Let's now go to this passage that I rather like. Who can go out but by the door? And we're tracking harmony between human nature and our principles. Now, I admit that it's not going to be too direct here. The master said, who can go out but by the door? How is it that men will not walk according to these ways? We are in book 6, section 16, 15, 17. The master said, who can go out without using the door? So why is it that nobody follows this way? The only way you can properly leave a building is through the door, and the only way you can properly live is according to the way Confucius teaches. Now, as I said, I admit it's not as direct as you might find in Aristotle or something, or maybe Mencius later in Confucian philosophy. Mencius, if there's any lack of clarity here, Mencius is one of the great Confucian philosophers, but he's a little bit later than Confucius, and we haven't talked about him in this series, except maybe the occasional very brief mention like right now. Let's check this other translation, book 6:17. The master said, who can go out without using the door? So why doesn't anybody follow the way? So I do admit that I'm interpreting this passage, but just a tiny bit. It's a fairly straightforward interpretation. I don't know how you could possibly avoid it. The Tao, the way, is the only way to live, just as the door is the only way to exit a room or building. You don't go out any other way. There's only one proper way to go out. There's only one proper way to live. My way, says Confucius, the Tao, Dong. There's still the occasional confusion about Tao. Some people still seem to think it's a concept from Taoism, another ancient religious or philosophical tradition from classical Chinese culture, classical Chinese thought. And it is. Tao is a concept in Taoism. Some people still seem to think, though, that it's a concept in Taoism, but not so much in Confucianism. Well, it does certainly occur. I think if we do a Control F here in this interlinear text, we'll find that it occurs up to 80-something times in the Analects. Okay, so that's actually my best passage on the importance of harmony between human nature and our principles. The way Confucius teaches, the principles he's teaching, those are the only way to live, just as a door is the only way to go out of a room. All right, let's go to a few other passages on some of these other aspects of harmony, and I really ought to pick up the pace. I'm trying to go home. I've only got 3 minutes left to meet my target for me to go home and help my wife with the kids and everything else. Okay, next, harmony between our lives and our principles. Well, we can be very, very brief here. Let's go to, for example, Book 5, Section 14. When Zilu heard a teaching but had not yet put it into practice, he would be apprehensive about hearing something new in the meantime. 5, Section 14. If there was something Zilu had heard but he had not yet been able to put it into practice, his only fear was of hearing something else. Zilu, one of Confucius' more prominent disciples, was afraid of not being able to apply something he had learned before he learned something else. Related 4.22. Book 4, Section 22, the master said, the ancients were hesitant to speak, fearing that their actions would not do justice to their words, in the Muller translation. The master said, the reason why words were not readily uttered in antiquity was because people were ashamed that they personally would not come up to them. And that's the Oxford World Classics translation. Let's jump over to Legge, because I like Legge's translation. The reason why the ancients did not readily give utterance to their words was that they feared lest their actions should not come up to them. So in these passages, we see the high priority placed by Confucianism as expressed in Confucius' reference to the ancients and this description of his disciple Zilu, the importance of living up to our own standards. You'll find in the Analects Yan Hui, Confucius' greatest disciple, as an exemplar of living according to these principles. Chapter 13, book 2, is it? I like this line about lawsuits. It's in my head that he says this, but that's not what we're talking about today, and I can never remember where to find it. So I hope I remember. It's in where was I? It's in book 12. Mental note: the lawsuits passages in book 12. I can never remember where to find that. All right. Zigong asks about the character of the noble man. Confucius said, first he practices what he preaches and then follows it. Well, that's a heck of a passage. Why am I here? That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the Yan Hui passage, right? So I don't know. I got confused. Book 1, of course, book 1, section 13 or whatever that was, is, I think, one passage where you'll find this doesn't feel like a book 1 chapter 13 passage, so I don't know, I'm puzzled. Why did I see 13? 9, book 1.9, book 2.9. My goodness, I don't know why my brain's going to all these numbers that aren't the right numbers. Sorry about that. There we go. There is one passage where I think you'll find that Yan Hui, Confucius' greatest disciple, is held up as an exemplar of someone who can apply Confucian teachings in his life, who achieves far more than most people a harmony between life and principles. Now, on this, I should say nothing further in this video. I've talked too much about it already. Let me just mention that if you're interested in this aspect of harmony and Confucianism, for heaven's sake, go back and watch my earlier video on practicing what we preach in the Analects. Now let's go to this next aspect of harmony, how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. And again, here I should say very little. Let me just say, there's an earlier video in this series on the golden rule in the Analects. Watch that. This is one aspect of harmony. Harmony between how I treat myself and how I treat other people. That's what the golden rule requires. And let me just go to my favorite passage. At the end of book 6. The Yan man, the person with this virtue, sometimes translated humanity, humaneness, benevolence, kindness, My notes here say I'm consulting Dawson on translation, but I consult Dawson, Legg, Gardner, Muller. I consult several people on translation. My notes are not always thorough. I can't keep track of everything all the time. The person who has this virtue, Confucius says, wishing himself to be established, sees that others are established. Wishing himself to be successful, sees that others are successful. Do for others what you want them to do for you. And to be able to take one's own feelings as a guide may be called the art of this particular virtue. Ren Yan. The art of this virtue is to basically know how to treat other people properly by knowing how we should be treated properly. This is one of the awesome golden rule passages in the Analects, and any golden rule passage in the Analects teaches the importance of having harmony in how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. So virtue means unity or harmony between human nature and moral principles. Our principles should line up to what we are and help us live properly as the kind of beings we are. And it means harmony between how we live and what our principles are. Once we have the right principles, we ought to live by them, and we ought to treat others the same way we treat ourselves. Not in all cases, not stupidly. Do acts of kindness and love for your mother that you would not necessarily do for all other people, or perhaps even for yourself. And I treat myself properly by pouring tea into my own mouth. Don't expect me to pour tea into your mouth if I ever meet you in person, because that's ridiculous. Except, I don't know, maybe in some rare circumstance you've been disabled and you want some tea. Yeah, sure, maybe I'll pour tea into your mouth. If you're sitting in a hospital unable to use your own arms after a car accident and you want some tea, maybe I'll pour tea into your mouth. Sure, in theory. But the golden rule is not to be applied stupidly. It doesn't mean do to others exactly that one thing you do to yourself. It means treat people properly. Use your knowledge of how you should be treated properly as a guide and as a check on error. Don't be a selfish jerk. Don't hold people to standards with respect to how they should treat you that you won't hold yourself to with respect to how to treat them. But that's just the negative golden rule, isn't it? There's also the sense of the positive, which I said in some detail in the other video on the golden rule. So let me just shut up about this. In this video, I recommend, if you want to hear me talk about the golden rule in the Confucian Analects, go back and watch the earlier video. Let's go to harmony and how we treat all humans. Here, I think I only want to cite just one passage, mentioning again that there's some distinction here. You treat all human beings properly is the point, and you might do things for your mother that you don't necessarily do for any random person on the street, but you treat all human beings properly is very much the point. And the passage I want to look at here is all within the 4 C's are his brothers. I think that's a nice way of saying all human beings. Let the superior man, well, I suppose I should scroll up and mention the vocabulary again. I think you'll find it's this term, 尊者. 尊者, pardon my bad pronunciation. The superior person, the virtuous person, the noble man, the gentleman, those are some other ways of translating that term. The superior man, gentleman, 尊者, pardon my bad pronunciation, will never fail. Let the superior man never fail reverentially to order his conduct. Let him be respectful to others and observant of propriety. Then all within the 4 C's will be his brothers. Same phrasing will occur in this translation. So we're in Book 12, Section 5. And here's that key word. Gentleman, nobleman is how it's translated here. If the nobleman is reverent without lapse and courteous to everyone within the frame of propriety, everything within the 4 C's will be his brother. Everything. Why should a nobleman be concerned about not having brothers? Let's now go to 12.5 in the Oxford World Classics. All within the 4 C's are his brothers. If a gentleman is reverent and avoids error, if he is courteous in his dealings with others and observes the obligations of ritual, then all within the 4 C's are his brothers. Why should a gentleman be distressed at not having brothers? Every human being is part of the same moral community. and everyone will be like a brother to you if you treat everyone properly. This, I think, is probably not at all there is to say about that interesting passage, but I think it's a good start. There should be harmony in how we treat all humans. Now, all of this leads to the kind of harmonious society that Confucius wants. He lives in the declining years of the Zhou dynasty, though things get worse before they get better. And he wants a more harmonious China. And his teachings are meant to help achieve that. All of this will lead to the sort of harmonious society we want. So here are some of the 5 aspects of harmony in the Analects. And now let me close by saying it is highly recommended that anyone interested in these matters go online and search for joy in Chinese philosophy. Type in joy in Chinese philosophy, put in quotation marks, and you should find this URL from Taiwan today. Now, I would tell you who wrote this, but I don't keep the name in my head, and for some reason I have trouble finding the name on this website. I think it was written long before the 1975. I think that's when 1975, I think 1975 is probably when it was published in some particular form, but I think the writing was earlier by some decades, but don't quote me on that. Ask me sometime. Ask me in a YouTube comment or a Rumble comment if you like, and maybe I can check my notes, or I think I can find the name of the author, though I can never find it on here. Joy in Chinese philosophy. This is a very good article introducing you to some of the basics of Confucian thought and Taoist thought and Zen Buddhist thought in traditional Chinese philosophy. And it will give you wonderful commentary on Confucianism and harmony. The Confucian joy springs from the love of learning, the harmony of human relations, and the realization of one's manhood or humanity. Now here, where the word nature is used a little more loosely, we're told that Taoist joy involves harmony with nature. So there are some distinctions there. Confucian harmony is more of a social harmony and less of a harmony with nature in one of those less specific senses. Here, the idea that springs to mind when you think of harmony with nature is probably a lot closer to what's actually going on in Taoism than it would be when I talk about being true to the principles of human nature in Confucian thought. In any case, this article is strongly recommended reading for anyone interested in these matters. And if anything I say is less clear than anything you find in this lovely article, Joy in Chinese Philosophy, on harmony and Confucianism, go with what this guy says. It's at least as good, probably considerably better than what I say. And if you learn this stuff better by reading than by listening to some nerd chatter on a YouTube video or Rumble video, for heaven's sake, turn this off and go read Joy in Chinese Philosophy. Search for it with quotation marks and find it at taiwantoday.tw, etc. Okay, this has been your ridiculously brief introduction to concepts of harmony in Confucian philosophy. Thanks for watching.